Today I want to talk about the differences in hot press, that's the smooth paper in watercolor, and cold press, which is the rough paper. And it doesn't matter what company it is in terms of as long as you're at the high end, as long as it's 100% cotton. But the difference is in the kind of texture. This is a Fabriano 140-pound paper, and this is from Fluid, which is part of the Speedball company, which has a company in Europe making these for them. And this is a 140-pound smooth or hot press. These up here, these large pieces, which we'll show you later individually, these up here are done on the hot press 9x12 and in layers. And that's what we're going to talk about, working these papers with layers and what happens when you work with layers on different papers. The important thing to remember is that for people that want to, for example, if you're using gouache and you want a flatter look, use the hot press, the smoother paper. If you're working in watercolor, traditional watercolor, you more than likely want to use the rougher one, and that's the one that gives us that kind of traditional watercolor look, which is bouncing around and a little bit of the paper maybe showing through and stuff. But when we're looking at layers, and let's look at layers here, because one of the things that you look at when you're looking at traditional watercolor is many times the number 2 pencil that you grew up with as in schools may have been the pencil that is best used for traditional watercolor drawing underneath. And so that may be on the rough paper. Why is that? That is because it's not as dark a pencil, and it's thin, and it won't show up as much. It's important in traditional watercolor that there's some sense of the drawing underneath. So this will still come up or show up. But let's look at this Derwent graphic here, which is a 6B. In other words, that's a heavy-duty dark one. 6B. Derwent is the great British company that makes a lot of the best watercolor pencils and things like that that we have. And look at the difference in the line. This fits the smooth, and this pencil is smoother. See the color in the graphite with a 6B and a number 2, which is kind of a middle middle graphite, but that's what its use is for. Always was used in schools, in businesses and stuff. It goes together with that yellow, the yellow legal pad, and things that have lasted through everything. So let's look here, and we'll look at them. And I'm going to use another traditional thing by some contemporary watercolorists, and that's using the dirty water. So that what I don't want is a bright color always. Sometimes I'll have it, but we'll look at those when we look at those later. I'm going to put a soft blue on the traditional one, on the rough watercolor. And what I want to do is take my toilet paper Now you can see up here what it is without the toilet paper blotting and what I get down there. What I get down there is the first of my layers on the rough. And I also can feel the paper. Okay, can you see what's happening here? That paper, when it becomes color, I can still feel those little bumps. See the little bumps. Okay, let's take that color and put it over here. Take the toilet paper, and you can use the cheapest toilet paper you can find. It's not a little brighter and more graphic.
You also see the texture.
And you can see the texture of the toilet paper. Over here, the texture of the toilet paper gets lost in the texture of the paper. Here, we're talking about the toilet paper as part of the medium. Go to a smaller brush, which is part synthetic and part hair. And we've talked about that before, the sable and the synthetic mixed, and it's called a sablette. This one's made by Utrecht or for Utrecht in Germany, but it's a very, very good watercolor brush.
Yeah, that's nice.
And it always comes to a point, as does that big one we just used. This time I'll go into a different dirty water, which has a little more blue in it. that brownish, kind of earthy orange that I want. Let's take that earthy orange and come over to the rough. And I want to keep some of that paper, the roughness of the paper, more to show, less fluid than this one. Fluid is an important word in watercolor because fluid really tells the story of the water in watercolor. So let's take a look at that and see what the definition of fluid in the definition of wet. When we do a traditional wet into wet process, the colors are already wet, the paper is very wet, and you soak the paper first. Neither one of these are we soak the paper first because they're on blocks, watercolor blocks, and secondly, they will respond differently than what I'm showing you now. Let's look at the toilet paper again, and let's go up here. It's had a little more time to soak in. Just to get a little bit of that in there, and it very subtly takes off. Now I'm going to do it over here. Again, very subtle, just a little bit. We're going to take a cadmium yellow medium and take it around here. And I'll bounce it around there a little bit. There you can see the yellow more. Okay, on this one, I'll go over here, come down in the nose and in the mouth. And over on the ear. And we'll take the toilet paper. And over here, the toilet paper. On the rough paper, things are softer. On the flat paper, a little more graphic. It doesn't mean that you can't be graphic on the rough paper, but you have to allow for it. Let's look at this one that I did yesterday with the last part of it being very graphic and not blotted, and all the things behind it blotted. So you can draw on top with your brush and not blot it if you want to get that contrast there. On the same paper, on the Fabriano rough, but this is what we were taught. We're getting it very subtle and expressive and moody. Less graphic, but more moody. Moody versus graphic. But they both tell a story. different ways. And that's the stories in the face, in the mask. Let's go back to where we were with the this is kind of a carmine fuchsia that's very strong, and maybe I want to use it more pronounced over here. Now let's go over to the boulder. So we're gradually building up these very, very tinted layers. Tinted layers versus this sort of layer, which is just drawn on in almost in an Asian way, just the brushes, the drawing. No pencil work for that last process. Okay. This time I'm going to go around the edge with this soft violet. Let's talk about violets and purple. We talked about purple before because we come to know purple as what's in the Crayola box. In ancient times, Julius Caesar wore a purple. So Caesar loved to wear it, and he declared with this other, the one of his right-hand men, that men that wear the purple togas, as a sense, have the most authority. Then he decided that he's the one that only could wear it. A lot of it had all the authority. Being a Caesar, he could do that. However, when Henry VIII decided to wear a then called purple robes and purple upper garments, he decided that he's the only one that could do it right away. And then he had one of his courtmen killed for wearing purple, or violet. Now I'm going to wet this again because it's been drying a little bit, and I'm going to take and we can see the strength of this to soften it. See, it doesn't soften as much. It's always bright, even though it's lighter, softer, and we can see on here, on the toilet paper, we can see that it took it again. Let me come back over here, and we're going to start now. Taking that same but going over, making lines. this time I'm going to take the toilet paper and dab it. So that I have more variety. In the
A dab will do ya, huh?
a little dab will do you. Let's take the cadmium yellow light, mix it with a lemon yellow, and a little bit of the earthy violet, and go around the violet.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, now it pops. Now I go back and I'm going to dab again like I was doing with the other one. I want some of the color to come through up there, and so that people are aware that it's in layers. Let's come around here. I'm going to go over that right there and right here. When I do that, it becomes brown. It gets an earth tone to it. Now I'm going to hit this.
Wow, that is a lot of layers.
Yeah.
That is neat.
And I can do it quickly.
You don't have to wait for them to dry, right?
No, that's it. Now let's take that blue that we used over on this one and use that for a dark. Come down and move it into a green. I'm going to blot this over here. Give him a beard, a green beard. Now the texture differences really show up. The rough and the hot press and the cold press.
Yeah, it really gives it a totally different look, even though you got the same colors going down.
Same colors, two different looks.
It's like the face is just emerging from the different layers.
Yeah. So we look at this as subtle and more depth of a color. And here it's more graphic. However, if I take one of my big pony hair brushes, which we talked about before, the old West German brushes that I've had since high school, with the welded handles,
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'm gonna bring in an earthy orange on top of this, with just letting a texture going in. And here, at this point, it hardly changes the focus. Look at the difference now.
Right.
Okay, here the pencil dominates, gives it a more graphic look. The pencil, the Derwent. Graphic artists use this pencil.
And that's the darker,
The
softer
darker
lead.
one. And this is that light,
Harder lead.
harder lead HB. That was the at number 2, the one we always used in school. And that's that. Look, the same colors. They look like they're 2 different colors. Okay, let's look at those. Let's look at the large versions of the ones on the flat paper and the smaller ones done on the Fabriano texture paper or the rough paper. So you can photograph these
Okay.
and these.
So did you want to summarize what your
Yeah. So we're going to look at the differences between the flat paper pencil marks on a larger scale, a larger format, the 9x12, and we're going to take one of them, this one, very important, because it was the last one I did on the 9x12 paper. It's different. It has kind of a pre-Columbian feeling to it. And having recently been in Mexico and going to the anthropology museums and things, I always have these things in my head. It's not pre-Columbian, it just has, I'm just using the kind of format. But it's different than the other ones because it's layers around the line, as opposed to layers in the forms. And that's what we're talking about in these heads here. I still always use the head, the mask, and all that. That still seems to be where my head's at, literally. So. The whole, what in the end we're talking about, besides just the hot press and the cold press and the blotting, is that no 2 watercolors can be the same if they're on different paper. They're blotted with toilet paper. They're about the same amount of water in with the watercolor, in with the pigments. And one of the other big differences is the graphic arts pencil, the 6B, and the HB2, the school pencil or legal pad pencil. So it doesn't matter what's right. One could say what's better than the other. They're two different ways of working. On the one with the heavier pencil, I could see myself building up more and more layers. On this one, I may stop right here. On the rough one, I may stop because it has something that I really like in it, and I just may stay there. Want to stay there with it and take this a little farther. I'm not as satisfied with this, with the one on the smooth pad. I'll take it farther, and it may end up like my large ones that you'll see on the 9x12s, which go on all day layering. Because in those cases, they dry and they layer, and they dry and they layer, and it goes on that way.